Welcome back. So at this point, you understand most of the intermediate concepts within Bento, and I want to walk you through some different ways to build and test advanced flow logic and branching logic within. So in this video, we're going to go through 3 different ways that you can branch subscribers within different pathways in flows. And I'll have you basically just build them along with me so that you can play with them and understand them and use them yourself later. So in all of these examples, what we are doing is testing a situation where somebody can buy either a pro plan from you or a light plan. And so what these are simulating are a real world event that would look something like this, where it would fire the purchase event with a plan type passed through. So the plan type in this case would either be professional or light. And what we're doing with all of these, this little segment at the top, these nodes here, all of these ones, these are all just for our testing purposes. So for a real life actual execution, when someone purchases something, none of those would be present. It would only be from here down for all of them. These ones at the top allow us to kind of simulate a purchase of a pro plan and simulate a purchase of a light plan. So let me show you how that simulation works. First, they all work the same way, all 3 pathways for the top. So what we do with all of these is we have a callable event type. So in this case, test pathway 1 pro, or in this case, test pathway 1 light. And the only real role that these triggers play is to give us something to trigger over in the run flow thing. So if you go manually add user, you can choose one of these. And that's important because what they do downstream, they all connect to a create event node that passes the plan type that corresponds. So they all just simulate a purchase happening without you having to actually go purchase it yourself to trigger it. One important note with how Bento does event matching by default is that whenever you trigger an event, it does a contains match. So what I had originally done is the real chain would be called, so in your case, not example purchase, it would just be your actual purchase. So let's say plan purchase. If you were to go up here and you were to do like test underscore plan underscore purchase, what would happen is when test underscore plan underscore purchase gets fired, that would also trigger this, because test underscore plan underscore purchase also contains plan underscore purchase. So in other words, this one I had Bento training example purchase 1. Originally, I had this as like test Bento training example purchase 1, and that was causing this one to trigger. And it was a good reminder to be careful about that. If you want to not do contains matching, and maybe Jesse will update this UI because he updates this to improve it all the time, and this one just rolled out a few days ago. So if you ever wanted to get around this contains matching, you can always use a liquid filter to do an exact match. And so in this case, it literally, the example here you could use. So if this one was, I think it's like event.name, maybe. Let's see if it auto completes it. I don't know. I'd have to check the documentation. I'm sure we can find it in the doc somewhere. But basically, you could have done it here. You could clear this out and have it exclusively living in the advanced filter to do an exact match, or just do what I did and very intentionally rename the longer tail one to not include the shorter tail one. So this one is Bento training example purchase 1. And so I did this Bento training test professional example purchase 1. So now the words are in a different order. But yeah, in any case, the kind of core flow of all these test things is that basically this test dash p whatever dash whatever plan is just a really lightweight shell that we can call from the tester, and its only job is to fire an event with a specific plan type. So that's how all those work. And then, as I said, from the main trigger node down is what simulates and mirrors real life functionality. So let's look at the 3 pathways. So I would say for 90% of normal usage, magic splits are the way to go. What's especially nice with magic splits is that Tanuki can flesh them out for you really easily. Let me go find what I generated this one on the left with. So ignore the ugly obsidian notes, but this here is literally what I typed. Create me a magic split where if event.details.planType is professional, it splits to the true path, otherwise splits to the false path. That's like literally what I put into Tanuki to generate this, and that resulted in this. Obviously, this isn't such crazy liquid that maybe I could have just typed it my own self, but why type when you could have AI do it? And so in this case, what's happening is that we would just basically have this really deep true-false branching chain. So if they are professional, it goes to the left. If they're not, then we check if they're light, it goes to the left. This model is really useful when there are not that many possibilities something can be. Where it gets cumbersome is like, let's say you run an e-com and you have 50 products, or let's say it's for me with my evergreen newsletter where I have like 50 different newsletters. Having this like deep chain of 50 if else's is really kind of inefficient. If you imagine product number 50, newsletter number 50, it has to do 49 false cases before it hits true. And so if you're working with something like that, that's where pathway 2 and 3, or pathway 2 or 3, will make a bit more sense. And in the case of 50 products, I think pathway 3 is the winner, because pathway 2 is this field switch, which I don't think it would even support 50. And if it did, how the hell would you even control 50 little dots? So I'm sure he limits it to like, I don't know how many, but I'm sure he limits it to something. So before we talk about those other pathways though, let's do a little test on this first one. And actually, before we do a test, I should show you what you need to see in order to build it. So let's first have you build the first one. So what we'll do for building this, I personally like this convention that I use of using comments throughout to like self-document my flows so that future Zach doesn't have to remember what the hell past Zach was thinking when he put different nodes here. This isn't so important for this pathway 1 where it's a relatively simple one, but for something like this, we're like clearing out temporary fields, setting fields, that kind of thing. And it's important to remind future you why you did all this stuff. So let's first set up the core test pathways. You're going to create 3 versions of this, and probably we'll have you create the new event and the tests. So what I want you to leave what we're about to do right now with is this, all of this stuff set up. And so I'll walk you through all those, and notice how much I have them spaced out here. You don't have to do the little divider boxes, but if you want to, you can just right click and go annotations and then box, and then you can just drag it to be skinny and wide. You can always resize this stuff later. If you hold shift and then left click and drag, that's how you do this box. So if you ever need to do that, you can just move things around that way. So first thing to do, let's create the 3 real chain triggers. So you'll right click and you'll go triggers and go new event. And you'll create it like this. And I'm going to go somewhat fast in that I'm going to have you like pause. So each time I tell you a step to do, I would just say pause the video and then go do the steps so that you don't get lost. And I also don't have to sit here in silence for like 30 seconds per step. So first thing, create a trigger node. The trigger should be bento underscore. Let's see if I can zoom in to make it easier. Come on, max zoom. Come on, max zoom. Okay, max zoom is not working. Bento underscore training underscore example underscore purchase underscore 1. That's the trigger event name. Nothing else to do here. Save it. And then actually, maybe before you saved it, right click and copy that label. And then you are going to create 2 more. But this time, instead of it being bento training example purchase 1, you would create one called example purchase 2, example purchase 3. So same name, just a different number at the end. And then at this point, you will have this, this, and this. You'll have your first trigger, like your real life trigger node for each. Then the next thing to do is scaffold out the testing infrastructure. So for each of those 3 trigger nodes, we want 2 test initiators, one for pro, one for light. So in terms of batching, let's think of what's going to be easiest. Let's do the triggers first, I think. So with this one, remembering that advice I gave you a few minutes ago that we need to not have the real trigger as a substring of this test event trigger, I would recommend you just name it like I did here. So bento underscore training underscore test underscore plan type underscore underscore example underscore purchase underscore 1. So basically within the scope of one plan type, the thing that would change is the the label of either professional or light. And then the number changes based on the plan type. So these two here would have the number 1. These two here have the number 2. These two here have the number 3. So I'll just like click through to show you. So Bento training test professional, example purchase 1. Bento training test light, example purchase 1. Bento training test professional, example purchase 2, etc. The double underscore thing doesn't matter. I just personally like to do that to kind of separate just chunks of data, but you do you. And then importantly for these ones, to make them easier to select in the runner, I would recommend you change their like event node labels too. So I did test dash pathway X, so pathway 1, pathway 2, pathway 3, and then dash plan name. And this will make it really nifty when you're in the little run tab because you can just so easily pick them. Whereas if you hadn't changed that, it would be that really long form name that would probably overflow the box on my screen. So create those 6, so all of the test initiators, and then we're going to create the 6 event firers. And so these ones are all quite simple. Basically, the 2 events within a pathway, they will both fire the same event name that you set below. So in this case, Bento training example purchase 1 is what both of these fire, Bento training example purchase 1. And if you're in here, you can literally just right click this and it'll select the whole text. You can copy it. And then the thing to understand is that these up here were new event triggers. So you went right click, triggers new event. But these here are create event actions. So you right click, actions, create event. And then you paste that event type. And then the difference within each is the plan type. So the one that's connected to the pro chain should pass plan underscore type of professional with a capital P, just because that's a convention we've been using so far. In general, I would try not to use capital letters if I could avoid it. But alas, that's what we've been doing the whole training. So that's what we're doing here. And then the other one still firing purchase 1, but this time for light. And so do that for all of them. And so like, in other words, this one is Bento training example purchase 3, plan type light. And then connect them. So you want the event trigger to connect to the event action, trigger to the action. And these are going to connect to nothing. So when an event that you create connects to nothing, it's the equivalent of if you went in here and you did, where is it? Splits and logic end session. So something connecting to nothing is the equivalent of connecting it to an end session. In this flow, I only actually use the end session node when I need it. So like, for example, when you split plan type as professional, if I didn't have an end session node on the left, so the true line didn't connect anything, the simulator might not run it, or it might not show which way it evaluated because it doesn't go anywhere. Like the simulator highlights things green. So in cases like this where you want to simulate something, it's important that you have that mark as complete just for like showing you what happened. But purely from a flow execution standpoint, it doesn't need to be connected at all because it doesn't. If somebody ends a node and flows off into the abyss, that's the same as if you ended the session. So at this point, you should have all your little test spoofers created. And for any complex automation chain you ever make where you plan to test it for a lot of different potential values, I think this testing infrastructure we created up here is really useful, just like spoofing events. You can also do this manually, but where it gets hard is passing event parameters, because I think when you're on a user's profile and you manually fire an event, I don't think, like you can't actually pass a parameter here. So the only way you could manually create an event for testing purposes would be, I guess if instead of this event looking at the plan type from the event details as the thing dictating our chain, so like for example down here, event.details.plan type, instead of that, if it worked kind of more like this one, which we'll talk about later, where we actually include the plan type in the event name, then you could get away with not having all this because you could go to a user's profile and literally fire that event name. So like what you'll learn in a minute is that this is for pathway 3, literally the event name, and there are no parameters passed because they aren't needed. Because the only thing we really need is the name of the thing. So I do this for my lead magnets, for example. It's like lead magnet opt in __ lead magnet name or whatever. And I use that because in the case of lead magnets, there are fixed details that every lead magnet would have, like the user's first name and stuff, which actually that doesn't even need to be an event param because that comes through as a custom field. So all I really need to know when I'm sending someone a lead magnet is just the name of it. And I'll show you this in one of the example videos in the next section. So I'm not going to worry about that here. But in any case, for something like this where you're spoofing event details, I just want you to know this testing infrastructure that we're doing here is a pattern that I use quite a lot and that you can use quite a lot. So it's not just for this one video, it's for real life too. Wow. So with all that stuff done, you should be able to build this first pathway now. So again, you can just have Tanuki do it, or you can do it yourself. Basically, magic splits. So if you go right click, splits and logic, magic split, they're really, really useful for a couple reasons. Number one, they're powerful because you can do any liquid evaluation within it. And then number two, what I like best about them is they evaluate basically instantly. So if you do a split in logic that is a normal split, it basically goes into the Bento like event queue where Jesse like processes every single thing that happens in a node, every single email that goes out. All of these things have to like dispatch an event in his code. And when you do a magic split, it doesn't do that maybe or something. I don't really know how Jesse's code works, but all I know for sure is that a normal split has a delay, a magic split does not. And that's nifty for us. So as a rule, doing only magic splits is best. So any split Tanuki ever makes will be magic split. So if you just want to ask Tanuki for something and review what Tanuki makes, that's great. Or you can just type it yourself since it has autocomplete. The main thing that's important is that the word true or the word false needs to be output. So just make sure that whatever you do here, it's always going to result in one of those because one of those needs to, or one / both need to happen for it to actually branch successfully. So in other words, if only true ever gets output, I don't know what'll happen in the else case. I haven't tested it. Like, will it default to false if the word false isn't present? I don't know. We could test it. And actually, maybe I will test it. So I'm going to show you how to test your flow. And I'm meanwhile going to test what happens if I intentionally break this to be bad. So let's say I changed it to this. So now it either outputs true or it outputs nothing at all. So don't you do this. It's bad. Bad, Zach. I'm just wondering because I'm going to show you the testing SOP. So basically the testing SOP from here, I just meant to save that. You first want to flesh out both magic splits and connect them all to just mark session complete. So that's under somewhere. I don't remember where. Attributes? No? Splits and logic and session. End flow is something else. End flow is for ending a different flow. We don't want that. We just want end session. That's like ending this current session, and we need that for the simulation. So create your magic split for the pro plan, create your magic split for the light plan, hook all the true and false cases up to end sessions other than this first one. So basically what happens here is we say, are they professional? If yes, mark complete. If no, are they light? If yes, mark complete. If no, also mark complete. But this here is technically an error case. So in real life, like nobody should ever hit that. And if they do, you'd probably want to know about it. And so in that case, you could do something like, I think, yeah, Bento has a send internal email, for example. So you could send an email to yourself that's like, yo, there was a bug in your automation. You should probably go fix it to kind of catch these kind of edge cases. So let's save it and let's test it. So what we'll do is we'll go to the run panel. And for this one, what do I want to check? I personally am going to do light because I want to see if false evaluates when it was missing. That's what I'm testing. So we'll go manual add user. And then we're going to, I'm personally going to do test P1 light. You can do pro or light, doesn't really matter. Just remember which one you did because you'll do the other one in a moment. I'm going to click start session. So we see it's queued and I'll close it. And now we want to wait for this test user to show up, which they did. So now what we can do is we can go to their profile with this little open profile thingy. And we can look at their event log, which is the first panel. So see how this first one, example purchase 1, happened just now? We can click this little clipboard icon to copy that event, which we can use for the little simulator view back in the flow. So now if we go into run, we can click this what will match thing, paste the event ID, click run test, and it'll give us this really nice highlighted flow that the user took. And in this case, look at that. My little janky test to see if false can evaluate simply by the absence of something, it proved that it is true. So provisionally, at least for now, the only thing that's actually important is for it to output true when true, and that presumably, like anything else, will just result in false. That's my guess, but this is, breaking the official docs, I think. Oh, no, it doesn't, because see this right here? I should have just read the freaking page. They go to the true path if it says true, otherwise down the false path. So false is just a fallback. So good to know, but probably still smart to be explicit and not rely on that false path. So I'll probably take this, put it back. Just good habits. So this simulation of what will match is really useful for cases like this, where everything's simple and self-contained, but for pathways 2 and 3, we actually can't really use it, unfortunately, because what this one relies on is user profile data and event data. And in both of these cases, we can't stream that quite as well. Like we can do it here, for example, but this creates different event chains, so you wouldn't be able to see it connect all the way down. You can only see the details of the specific chain it matched, and that'll make more sense in a second when we talk about it. So before we move on to paths 2 and 3, just make sure you've tested this and also run it on the other. So I just did it on light, do another on pro now, and make sure that it doesn't do this and that it instead does this. So we'd want it to go boop, boop, and then to the left path. And if something about this doesn't work correctly, talk to Tanuki until you get it working correctly, because it's really important that you understand how to debug these things, test these things, and make sure they work as expected. And any comments you want to leave for yourself about how different things work, why they work, why you built them the way you did, I think that's a good habit to build. So maybe take a moment to leave some of those comment notes. My personal convention is that I use purple. So I'll go in here, click it in the color picker. I use purple for titles of flows, and then blue for little annotations, and then I reserve yellow and red for bugs or to-dos or something like that. But you do you. So now let's talk about pathway 2. The kind of core job to be done of all 3 pathways in this example is the exact same. So all we're trying to do in pathway 2 is, again, just do some special stuff for the pro plan people, do some special stuff for the light plan people. So in reality, maybe you'd send a special email welcome to the light plan versus welcome to the pro plan, and that's what all 3 of these chains accomplish. But the difference of the how is what differentiates them. So in this case, at the time of recording, so July 2026, when you are using a field switch, so you right-click, go splits and logic, go field switch. This field switch is nifty from the standpoint of being able to branch out for let's say you have 5 different plans. If you were over here for 5 different plans, you'd have to create 5 if-elses. And so that was the example I gave before. For a match on number 5, it has to first evaluate 4, which for 5 plans I don't think is a big deal. But as it gets to be a larger number, 10, 20, 50, maybe it is a big deal. Or maybe you just like the idea of doing it this way. And in this case, what we do is we run that switch, but it has to be on a custom field. It cannot be on event details. So I would say if you're in real life working with a situation like this, you probably should never do pathway 2. I was actually thinking of deleting pathway 2 from this video, but I figured I would still show you because I think the workarounds that I put in place kind of teach you some really interesting core concepts about Bento that I use all the time when I butt into situations like this that I think would be good for you to learn. So we'll do pathway 2. But just understand, you probably shouldn't actually do pathway 2. You'll either do pathway 1 or pathway 3 in this exact situation, which is to say the plan name is passed through event details, so it's not available as a custom field. That's the je ne sais quoi of why we're not going to use pathway 2. But all that being said, let's take a peek at how it works, and you can follow along too. So let me give you the high level first. So the first high level is that the field switch is kind of the key piece here. However, because at the time of recording, the field switch cannot evaluate liquid, that means that we can't say if event.details.plan type equals professional, go here. If it equals go here, we can't, because I tried that, and it evaluated to the fallback, which meant that it wasn't actually parsing it. And so because of that, we have to use this strategy that I use sometimes, which I would call temporary field value stashing. So whenever there's something that can't parse event details, but that you need to be able to parse event details, what you can do is you can create a temporary field that you plan to clean up and delete in a moment where you stash that info. So in this case, I just made a field called TMP underscore underscore. And again, the double underscore doesn't matter. It's just a taste thing. Plan type. And then I pass event.details.plan type. And then the field switch is not looking at the event details. It's looking at that custom field we stashed. Does that make sense? Hope so. And one other consideration here is that the nice little what will match dry run thing that we did over here where it made all these green, this relies on real-time information about the user and the event details. And so in this case, because the field switch is looking at their temporary field, and because we delete that temporary field immediately after setting it, we cannot use the dry run what will match. You can, but it'll be wrong. So if you use the dry run what will match, it'll always show you the error pathway, even when it didn't happen. And the reason why is that, let's say you click initiate and it flows through right now, right this moment. And you wait like a minute for it to show up on the right side, and you go to the profile, you copy the event ID, you paste it into the what will match. By then, it's fully run and it's fully deleted this. And so given that this is matching on the value of temporary plan type, and given that when you click what will match, temporary plan type is empty, it'll always show you this fallback. And so that's where we use one more temporary field, which is almost this like debug output field. So I created this. So TMP route to path professional. So basically this is here as like a logger to let future us know this is the pathway that was taken. And that lives on their profile. So basically, the way that this would work in practice is that the test stuff, it fires exactly the same as always. And then it hits the new event node exactly the same as always, nothing special. And then we clear out the path that got hit so that every time we run this, we have like fresh data. Because let's say that you didn't clear it out and it was set at professional from the previous run. And then this time, I don't know, something happened where it didn't set it to any value at all. It would still show professional, making you think it hit professional when it actually didn't hit anything at all. In the case of this flow, that's like literally not possible because this pathway, we literally set it to other. But nonetheless, I think it's good practice to kind of clear out debug test fields before logging to them. So that's what we do. We clear that out before we start. And then as I already showed you, we just set the plan type to event.details.plan type. And then we fill out the field switch for our two plan options. Notice that we have capital B and capital L. That's important because that's what we set them to up here. So it needs to exactly match to evaluate true. And then once it does match successfully, we clear out that plan type because it's not needed anymore. And that's kind of my rule for temporary fields, is I try to clean them out if I can. In this case, we leave it uncleaned because we need to look at it as debug data. But for something like this, where we're literally just setting it so that we can read it, I do like to unset it immediately. And then we make that log entry just for debugging purposes, and then you would send whatever email, etc. So now you know that strategy. Again, I don't think you need to do this for real life, but I did want to teach you this concept of temporary value stashing. So in this case, you're good to run it again in the tester. So you go run manual add user test.p2, and let's do light this time so I can show you the value changing, and click start session. And I guess I can show you this one matching incorrectly too. So if I go to their profile, it'll take a couple minutes to evaluate through. Like you see, this still shows professional, but it's also still running at the time of refresh. See how it's still running this flow? So it's not totally done yet. And if I refresh again and it shows, so now it shows light, cool, and it'll probably show it as being complete. Oh, but it still says running, 3 out of 4 steps. So we'll give it a minute before it's complete, but that's an important thing when you're testing this stuff is don't expect it to be instant, and you can use the flow status of running or completed to help you determine if your stuff is broken or if maybe it just hasn't gotten to that step quite yet. So in this case, it's showing 5 out of 6 steps. 7 out of 7. Cool. So now it's done. And so if it still didn't show light, that would be concerning. And now to show you what I mean about evaluating incorrectly. So if we look at this flow, the only possible situation where it could evaluate or like it could get set to light is this middle one, right? Because this sets professional, this sets light, this sets other. So there's literally no other way the word light could get set as the value for temporary route 2 path. But with that in mind, if we go to run, we go to what will match and we paste that event ID. Wow, look at that. So if we were relying on this, we would think we broke our thing and that didn't work. But alas, this is just that thing I said earlier where it's looking at current data. And so in this case, this node is looking at temporary plan type, but this person doesn't have temporary plan type, and that's why it would evaluate false. So we have to rely on some way of like logging on their profile or otherwise that XYZ thing happened. All right, so now let's look at the final pathway. This is a pattern I use quite a lot. In my production bento, this pathway 2, I pretty much never use it. Like I don't think I've ever used a field switch even one time. I didn't even like really know it existed until the other day. But what we're about to do, I use all the time. I mentioned earlier the lead magnet context. So this one's quite simple. But it can be harder to simulate. So I would say still don't use it over the magic split unless you've got a really good reason. So, you know, the 20 products e-commerce thing is a good example. My shadow newsletter, evergreen newsletter is a good example. Lead magnet's a good example. But basically, the way it works is that this one fires as normal. So test purchase 3 with event.details.plan type. And then we change the name of the event we call to inject the like unique identifier, assuming it's a normal word with no spaces. I think if it was like pro space plan, I don't think this would work. You would probably need to do some liquid to transform it because I don't think event names can or should have spaces. So that's one consideration for you. But when I do this for my lead magnets, for example, I'm passing the lead magnet slug. So if the lead magnet is called like free training course, it would be lowercase free _training _course. That would be what's getting passed here. And so what this does is we call an event that is like a modulated name based on the plan name. So in this case, we're either calling one called purchase _professional with a capital P or purchase _light with a capital L. And so all this does is we just set these up where we have that name thingy at the end. And then that's it. Simple. And you can see here in the event log an example of it being called. And you can see an example of it being called with nothing at all when I originally did a typo here. So originally I created this with like plan _name. And then I ran it and I was like, what the hell? Why didn't it run? Oh my God, Bento's so broken. And then I checked and up here, I saw that it was plan type and I had typed plan name. So that's kind of the debugging process. And this is another instance where the what will match won't work. So let's have you build it out first. So basically, whatever your 2 plan names are from up here, so professional, light, you need to create 2 event triggers down here with a predictable pattern at the beginning that's the same between both. And then the only thing that changes is the plan name. So that's what these 2 triggers are, and then that's it. And if you needed to, you could change this with liquid. Like, let me test something real quick. So I'm going to again test some weird stuff. I don't know if it'll work. 2 things I checked is how with liquid we could lowercase something. And I just Google this stuff. So liquid lowercase, you could ask Tanuki, you could ask the GPT I linked to, whatever. But these were simple enough. I figured I would just check. And in both of these cases, it looks like there are ways we can handle these situations in real life. So let's think of how I can show you. Okay, so here's what it would be IRL. So the first thing I had up, the white space control did not work correctly, which makes sense. I'd never seen it before, and what I was trying to find anyway was just a replace. So liquid, as you probably know from the liquid lesson, if I said it, liquid allows you to append these little pipes followed by different kind of liquid functions to change things. So in this case, if we had this string, it would just output ProPlan. So pretend this was your event.details.plan name was pro space plan. That's what I'm simulating up here. It would output it exactly as is. But if we append downcase, it will change it to be lowercase pro space lowercase plan, like this. And then we can append this find and replace, where it'll replace spaces with underscores and do this. So if you were ever trying to do this for realsies, let's take these. And you could, if you're using underscore and lowercase anyway, it would be pretty safe to just do this from the start. So if you want to do like some advanced stuff right now, instead of just doing event.details.plan type, try this. So space downcase, or space pipe space downcase, then space pipe space replace a space with an underscore. Let's see if I can zoom on this. No, I can't. Maybe I can zoom on the liquid tester field page. Yeah, there we go. So basically you just want to append this to what you have, or technically you append this with a space. And if you do this, the difference for your flow, in my case, it'll be almost the same, but the event names will be different. They will be a lowercase, which is better practice anyway. So I would go in here and change this. So I'll just copy, delete it, and change it to lowercase professional. And then I'll do that here too. And then let's do another one. Maybe I'll just change this to be a little bit more interesting. So let's say this one, instead of light, I'll just do an example like example multi-word light. Save that. And then I'll need to change this. And you don't have to do this part. I just want to show you. Example multi. Ooh, and let's actually do this. Let's keep the hyphen so you can see what I mean. Multi-word light. So in reality, you would have hyphenated this. You would have said multi-word. But because we only replaced spaces, it wouldn't have replaced that hyphen. So if my theory is correct, if I save this and I go run, manually add user, P3 light, we should see an event name fired for them that matches this. And in this case, as I mentioned before, we can't really test this one with the dry run matcher either. We rely on looking at their event log. So in this case, don't see it quite yet, but these things do take time sometimes. Let's see if the flow is still running. Yeah, so we see it's still running, so that's potentially fine. Doesn't necessarily mean I messed up. Ooh, yeah, look at that. And so we can do the simulator for the pathway that gets called from the main event. So in other words, let me show you. So when you run the simulator for these, you either get to simulate just these or just these. You don't get to simulate all four. And so in this case, if I wanted to, I could copy this and go into the little what will match dry run thing and choose that event. And it does show these two. It's just not that useful, in my opinion, for something simple like this, because what we would really want to see is that it hit these two and then it hit these two, but you can't see that because they're two different like event chains. So one event chain was this one. So if I copy that, we can go here, and now you see these, and then the second event chain was these. So the only way you can know that they ran like in sequence like this is just by looking at the distance when they were called and looking at the flow history and stuff like that, seeing that these all chain together. So hopefully this was useful for you. In general, as I said before, sticking to something simple like the magic splits is what you'll want to do most of the time. But the underlying concepts that allow these two others to work are really useful advanced concepts for you building more complex email automations. So hopefully you got some nice gems here, and see you in the next video.